So energy efficient, um, durable, and made in America. So that was like my first rodeo. Learned a ton um, about branding, product, marketing, storytelling.
Hi everyone, my name is Vaishnavi and I'm the founder of khaa-lo, which is a platform connecting indie CPG brands and small creators to their consumers, third places, and you name it. Today we have Joe and Drew from Smearcase on our podcast. Um, and and Joe and Drew are your next protein dealer. I've been waiting to say that. I love how catchy it is. Well, Smearcase's main attraction is the protein in the ice cream. There is also a good amount of collagen. So actually, Joe, before you got on the call, I was telling Drew that I was going through your guys' nutrition sheet and I was just pleasantly surprised to see that on there. And for any ladies listening to the podcast, I mean, for me too, there aren't a lot of ice creams that have a good ratio of protein, let alone collagen. So I'm very excited to learn more about your guys' story because this is again something really cool. And you guys are sold out on your website, but you're also in 100 stores across the US. So congratulations on that. And we're very excited to hear from you. So without further ado, Joe and Drew, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that intro. It's great to be here. Excited to dig into what makes us your new protein dealers. I'm Joe. Started Smearcase in July of 2023, training for a marathon, was craving ice cream, and just my naivete just couldn't believe that ice cream is truly terrible for you. It's high in fat, high in sugar, low in protein. And that's where I saw, opportunity to disrupt and innovate and ultimately create a new category, two new categories in the frozen dessert aisle, one being high protein ice cream and two being frozen cottage cheese. And I'm sure we'll dig into it later, but with that came a lot of out of the box thinking, and it resulted in something that is truly a game changer.
And I'm Drew. Nice to meet you, Vishnavi. I'm our CFO, COO, co-founder, um, long-standing friend of Joe's. We both had some entrepreneurial endeavors where we crossed paths in New York years ago and kind of were friends from day one. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that. But thanks for having us.
Awesome. I mean, I'm there, like I said before, I have so many questions I want to ask you guys. And I think just starting off with talking a little bit more about your journey, how you guys met. I know, Drew, you just mentioned that you guys crossed paths and were friends from day one. And maybe Joe, we can listen a little bit from you because you mentioned that you were training for a marathon and that's how you came across this idea. So was this an aha moment, or if this was like a series of tests that, oh, this is we want to make an ice cream that is heavy in protein? Would love to hear more about this.
Yeah, would love to unpack it. So I mean, I grew up around food, and I've been always passionate about health and wellness and fitness. And I think when you put those two together, you're always looking for the healthier version of what you're already consuming, right? So a big thing for me was ingredients. Like I'm always looking at the ingredient list, and then I'm looking at the macros of the product. So, what you're putting into your body is super key. So having the background in food and having that passion for branding, storytelling, and product, like just putting those two together is like, okay, how can, you know, for selfish reasons, how can I make a healthier ice cream that I'm comfortable consuming? Right. So I started making it myself in my kitchen with my sister. And it was, I noticed that there was no high protein ice cream, and I was eating a lot of cottage cheese at the time. So I was like, oh, what if, we use cottage cheese as the base because it's just a super food. It's high in protein. It's low in fat. There's ice cream, there's frozen yogurt, there's plant-based alternatives, but there's no such thing as frozen cottage cheese. So that was like the first out of the box thinking that went into it. Um, And, if I want something to eat, I'll make it myself. I live in New York City, but I don't really go to restaurants. So we were just putting things together. We were thinking of like creative ways to add more nutritional value to the product and bypass the reliance on gums or stabilizers in ice cream, which is super popular in the ice cream industry because it adds creaminess and texture and stability. But we got to bypass that by using collagen. Collagen is gelatinous, it's protein focused. So by using that, collagen is the glue to our bodies, and then it also became the glue to our ice cream. So just understanding ingredients and the value that they provide, on a scientific level, like that sort of opened the door for us to bring that health and fitness perspective. And then just like, again, being an outsider to ice cream allows you to think outside the box of creative solutions. So like it just sets up an environment for you to create your own rules.
Right, right. And also, so cool. I actually didn't know this about collagen, so I'm learning as you are talking. Definitely, like, I think transparency is such a key in today's consumers. For khaa-lo, we run a lot of surveys, and I think I've honestly like said this in one of the other podcast episodes before too, that when we run surveys, like flavor and taste are usually at the bottom of the priority list for consumers. Because now there are so many options. There is accessibility to information, to like learning about how their people's food is being manufactured and produced. So yeah, I would love to like dig in a little bit more in the with the ingredients, because I remember you also mentioned, Joe, on your LinkedIn that you guys source all your products from within the US. So give us a little bit more of an insight into your production and manufacturing. I believe you guys do that in Hudson Valley in New York.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Drew could tell you a little bit more about
Yeah.
how we're thinking about sourcing ingredients and um, why we're choosing New York and then
Mhm.
eventually California.
Nice.
Sure. Yeah. So we started locally, honestly, just because of the feasibility element, right? Like the Hudson Valley's in our backyard. It's an hour drive up to a farm. We made a connection there pretty quickly when we were vetting a few different places, and this dairy farm slash creamery had all the sort of certifications we would need to go into the big retail accounts like the Sprouts and the Whole Foods of the world. So that was really important for us early on, was like thinking end in mind. We want to be a big player. We need to make sure production can scale with us. Production meets the quality standards of the highest degree. And so that trickles down into the ingredient as well. Joe mentioned earlier, he's a big nutrition label guy, reads all the ingredients. I've quickly become that, and it's amazing how long they are when you actually look at them. This is mac and cheese. Why does it have 9 million things on it? And it's crazy to see how that varies by region, but that's a rabbit hole. Um, so yeah, I think we had a really high standard for quality of production, very high standard for the types of ingredients that we were going to include. But at the end of the day, it also needs to yield a product that is outstanding, and so we spent a lot of time on making sure that that formula was really ready to bring to market, and we're proud of kind of what we've developed. I think just one last thing is it's interesting that you said in the surveys, taste and flavor are becoming less of a priority because I think in the frozen section, it's still a pretty high priority for consumers because, and this is just anecdotal, but you're going there with the intention of having something indulgent, and so we're in this weird category that we're creating that isn't indulgent, and so we're trying to rewire the consumer's mind that this, even though it tastes indulgent, you can have this every day. You can have this for breakfast. I actually consume it way more in the morning than I do at night. And that's usually coffee or smoothie versus at night, like I'll make a shake with it or just eat it out of the bowl. So it's interesting, like kind of how we're navigating all of these things. But um, yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you mentioned that, when you're going looking for frozen items, like not just ice cream, honestly, you are looking for something that is indulgent. Like, I'm thinking like when I'm looking for ice cream, I'm thinking like I'll get a pint and like watch movie with my friends and like, just like enjoy that. And I like something specific, like as a consumer that I loved, Drew, that you just said is rewire the consumer's brain around, like it's better to have something healthier. And because I think like there has been so much just like um marketing and like branding around like selling people items that are at the end of the day not really that great for their health, but sometimes people want to surpass that. I definitely do think that's changing with Gen Z, especially because most of Khaa-lo's audience has been Gen Z. And like I said, like from the surveys it was very clear that they were prioritizing wellness and well-being first. So I would love to know a little bit more about like your guys's marketing and branding strategy to make sure that like you are able to, as Drew said, rewire the brain of the consumers. Like, what are some tactics that you've used? How can like how are you convincing your audience to convert to an ice cream that is high in protein?
Yeah, great question. And just one more thought on the ingredient side, like what's super cool about the milk we use is that all of our milk is from a farm that we know.
Oh,
Like we know
amazing.
where the milk is coming from. They're coming from family-owned farms. These cows are treated incredibly well, and it's all single origin, right? So
Yeah.
like the ingredient list is important, but knowing where those ingredients come from are just as important.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, like when we were looking at the ice cream set early on, when we sort of made the choice to sort of go for it, we really analyzed like what's missing from ice cream. Obviously, it's protein, right? Obviously, it's nutritional value. But looking at the ice cream set is like what type of story is missing from here? If you look at all the pints that are on display, they're also very colorful, they're very whimsical, and most of them have a name. You have Ben and Jerry's, you have Haagen Dazs, you have Jenny's, you have Nick's, you have Alex, right? You have all these just names, and we didn't just want to be just another ice cream brand. We wanted to be more. We wanted to be a protein brand. We wanted to speak to the customer who was looking for that nutritional value. So we made the strategic decision to name the brand Smearcase, which literally means cottage cheese in Dutch. And it's just a little ode to our not so secret ingredient. And when we were looking at the list of names that we were considering, Smearcase kept jumping off the page because it drew curiosity, it captured attention, it was bold, it was strong, it's to us, it said protein, right? And I think like with that boldness on the ice cream shelf, you look at our pint and it doesn't say I am a indulgent, unhealthy dessert. It more so says like I am functional, I add value, and you get something out of me. So that was like a very calculated branding exercise that we went through. And then from there, like we named our product Froco, short for frozen cottage cheese, right? If you see that term, the customer just inherently understands like, oh, I get this. You have
Yep.
ice cream, you have froyo, and now you have Froco, frozen cottage cheese. So it's important to build a moat around your brand, and
Mhm.
it starts on shelf through the aesthetics for humans who are drawn to aesthetics, and then the
They
name.
are.
So in a sea of brands, like you want to grab attention in seconds.
Yes, yes. I mean I so agree. I think like also the play on Froco, it just like makes it more playful because for Froyo, like I remember as a teenager, like that was kind of like the thing to do like back in 2015, 2016, like you would go with your friends to the mall and you are getting Froyo together. So I think like in a way like adding this playfulness like kind of because I mean I don't think as teenagers a lot of kids are thinking about like their wellness and I mean you're young, so I think like adding Froco just probably helps you guys expand your audience and like your reach more. So I really love that, and I mean talking more about like the CPG world and like the protein world, obviously there is a hype in the CPG world around protein these days. And I don't think it's just the US. Like, again, talking about, like I was just traveling recently and it's interesting to see how like in different parts of the world too, like it is catching on to this hype. And your take on a healthier ice cream is actually you going back to the traditions from the 19th century American society. So would love to actually know a little bit more about the recipe. I know, Joe, you said that again you were experimenting with your sister at home, and again would love to Drew also get your insight on how you are bringing it to the modern world while keeping or like getting inspiration from the past.
Interesting. Yeah, but when I first told Drew about this idea, he was like, "There's no way
Yeah.
that this is good," you know? So like that was one of the first steps was like um we brought Drew into the lab, aka our
Yeah.
tiny New York City apartment kitchen, and we just wanted to prove like, hey, this is actually good, and here's how we make it. Um, and yeah, like it's a fun process. We just got done with R&D at the farm, and it's cool to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting for sure. And I mean, I would like I would love to know, Drew, more like from your perspective, like when Joe came to you, and he was like, I want to build this ice cream from cottage cheese. Like, what was
Yeah,
your reaction?
I was definitely skeptical. I wasn't like an inherent cottage cheese lover. I have since become a cottage cheese lover. I was
Yeah.
just always wigged out by just the look of it, and I never really gave it its fair.
I think a lot of people feel that
Yeah,
way.
I've since like trained my brain to believe I'm eating burrata and like dress it up with tomatoes and olive oil and basil, and so that's a easy entry if you're into the savory approach. But I remember Joe specifically saying, "This is how ice cream should have always been made." And so your comment before around like getting back to our roots and like I just reflect on my time as a kid having ice cream. It was choose chocolate, choose vanilla, choose strawberry, or choose all three. And it was just a very simple product. And it's since become let's pack however many brownies or cookies that we can shove into a pint and call it ice cream. And so we knew from the get go, like, it's kind of like Joe was saying, like, we looked at the shelf and it was indulgent, it was gluttonous, it was whimsical. Like, what is the antithesis of that? We want to stand for something totally different. It's not something that you just have once a month on the couch when you're, it's something that you're having post run, it's something that you're having to start your day. So it's a huge hurdle to climb, but it's like the aspiration that we set sort of for the brand. And we like when you look at the ingredient list, when you look at the product, you kind of ask yourself, why wasn't it always made this way? Like it tastes like ice cream. It's got the right texture, and it's half the calories, half the fat, and 7 times the protein. So we're like really proud of that value proposition, and like I think the product definitely speaks for itself, but there's a huge hurdle to climb to educate consumers because there's people in my camp that didn't like cottage cheese and are scared from the get go. And then there's others that have some scar tissue from trying diet ice creams in the past that are icy or chalky or flavorless. And so we're bringing hope. Our goal is to bring people back to the ice cream aisle and then ultimately to this new category, both your ice cream enthusiasts, like traditional diehards, and people that have just chosen to avoid ice cream because of how gluttonous it was, which is sort of where Joe was at when he started developing this.
That is amazing. I feel like, like you guys have such an interesting product and like also such an interesting strategy around it. Like I feel like every time you guys answer one question I have, like I want to know more. And I think like within within itself, like as a product, because again, this is something that like, I have conversations about all the time with young brands is like how do we like we get on the shelves, but the next challenge is how do we get off the shelf? And I think like you guys are also building this like curiosity around something that is because I mean like so many conversations that I've had, with my girlfriends, but also like with my brother and other guys like, in their 20s like my age, and it's always been around like how do we improve our protein intake and lessen the amount of sugar that we take. So I think like what you guys are doing really well is building curiosity around the product, like at least like from a consumer point of view. So I like I also again like I want to go back to something like I want to know a little bit more about your guys' story, and I'm gonna go back to something Drew said earlier in the podcast, and I think it was like how you guys crossed paths in your entrepreneurship world. So yeah, like tell us a little bit more about like what your guys' background was and how you decided to like go just like full on into the CPG world.
Yeah, out of college, I launched my own clothing brand. I studied
Very
apparel
cool.
design. Um, so just like I was very passionate about clothing, sustainability, and in school, uh, the professor was like, "All right, like we're gonna make a skirt," and I was just like, "Come on, like I'm the only guy in class. Cut me a break here. Like, can I make a pair of jeans?" And it was I definitely probably pissed a lot of professors off, but I was stubborn and I made a pair of pants. And that just like was like, oh wow, this is like applicable to like I could go out and use these, right? I wasn't gonna wear a skirt. Like I wanted to wear a pair of jeans that I made. So I wanted to learn by doing. So I just put like what did I learn in class and how can I apply it? And that was when I sort of discovered entrepreneurship. So I launched Rocky Clark when I was in school. It was a men's luxury sustainable denim line,
I
making
know
it
what
out
you're
of
talking
organic cotton
about.
and hemp. So
Mhm.
energy efficient, um, durable, and made in America. So that was like my first rodeo. Learned a ton um, about branding, product, marketing, storytelling, and then just like the game of entrepreneurship. And how did I step into CPG? Like again, like I grew up around food, passionate
Yeah.
about health and wellness. So like I unknowingly was always surrounded by this. Like, growing up, opening up the pantry and just seeing all these brands. So just exposed to branding and marketing. But then also just like super tapped into diet and exercise. So knowing how to fuel your body, know which ingredients and which the right types of foods. So just like putting the puzzle together, taking your skill set and just like seeing like, after I sunset the clothing brand, like I was looking for another sort of opportunity and I just was looking at my skills and my passions and how I could, package that up and add value in some type of way. And once I sort of made that realization, the idea of Smearcase came to be. Um, but yeah, like, being I'll let Drew share his path, but you know, we have similar paths, right? And like being a ambitious young lad in New York,
Yeah,
specifically in the clothing industry, the world shrinks, and that's
it
how we
does.
crossed paths. Was like just being immersed in the garment industry, being immersed in ambition and entrepreneurship. Like you cross paths with the right people at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you do. Drew, I mean, Joe, you and I have very similar stories. I actually got into entrepreneurship myself from upcycling jeans. So, and it was like a whole college project. And that was my first taste with like at 1920 with like how to like build a brand and build a website, not a website, but like more like, how to build an e-commerce website and all of that. So this is very interesting
I
to
love
hear.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we'll have to learn more about your brand. But for now, Drew, would love to hear your thoughts, your side of the story.
Yeah, I mean, similar path, very aligned weirdly. It's like we were living a parallel life. I had a clothing company called Delmonico, also in New York, and Joe and I had shared connections in the garment district. And I remember seeing his Instagram and just really resonating with it, and just thinking like it was a full team, and then meeting Joe and realizing, oh my gosh, this guy has the same output as 10 humans. He's doing a Monday newsletter. He's curating an incredible feed, and he's custom making cut and sew jeans. Like he's not drop shipping t-shirts. He's like actually building a real clothing company. And we just like we had an interesting relationship from the start. We're cut from the same cloth. We both have like Italian American heritage, entrepreneurial families who, kind of are underdog types and trying to figure it out on our own, and both have that sort of entrepreneurial drive. So we connected. We kind of had, like, I would say, like a close cousin relationship. He lived in Brooklyn, so I didn't get to see him that much. But whenever we got together, we always had like really deep conversations about kind of building our brands in the city. It was during one of those deep conversations where he shared Smearcase, and that was that moment where I was like, no way is this good, and it kind of snowballed into him inviting me into the lab, and then joining the business full time, or yeah, as a co-founder. So yeah, we both have like really similar passions. I think sustainability is at the top of that, and I think that coincides really um, closely with kind of the clean ingredient list. It's like, why introduce things to a product that don't need to be there? Why consume something that is bad for you or bad for the environment? Like, I wasn't a fashion major. I was building my brand just based on kind of wanting to see what was in my closet at the time. But I had studied sustainability at school in undergrad back when it was very unpopular. It was like a brand new minor. It wasn't even a major option yet. Um, so yeah, we really just hit it off, and it's fun to see kind of our talents and passion align around something in an industry that's like kind of more accepting
Mhm.
of innovation and just new entrants in general. I think fashion is kind of a fierce environment. And like if you're in the indie scene, yes, it shrinks, and you have like a cool, close network. But like CPG, it just seems as though it's been like familial from day one, and people are like inviting you in to learn about your business and what you're trying to achieve. And I think that was probably one of the more exciting things for us was when we debuted, seeing such big players tell us, "Well, we didn't think this was possible," and it's like, well, Joe and his sister in their Brooklyn kitchen like made it possible, and it's cool to be in an industry where like there's that acknowledgement.
That is incredible. And Drew, honestly, it kind of sounds like you were the first consumer slash customer that Joe convinced the validity of your product. And I think like, like that is so cool. And I think like terms of fashion, I so agree. Like, I mean, for me, previously in my corporate job, I was in tech, and I mean, it is competitive, but like mostly it's chill. But like the CPG world, again, something that you mentioned, like it has felt so not just like welcoming, like it feels like you're always like even with these podcasts, like you are learning all of these like products that are like built from the heart. And I think that is so incredible. And so important because I mean, especially because we are all about like small businesses and like small brands, to like hear your guys' stories and also just that, there isn't one path to getting into the CPG world. Because you guys came from like fashion and sustainability and like there are so many people who that have been on the podcast and have been in tech or have been in investment banking and so yeah, like I'm really excited for what you guys are building. I want to like ask you guys one last or no, two more questions and then we will be done. In terms of, going back to like talking about like consumers and audience, what is something that the consumers slash the audience can expect from Smearcase in the next couple of months?
Wow. Yeah, it goes back to an earlier question you had was just by observing customers, right? Observing macro trends. You mentioned this huge wave of protein, right? Protein prioritization. It's arguably the most important macro, getting that nutritional value out of what you're consuming. But also noticing that customers understand and know that cottage cheese is good for them, but associate it with their grandmother or grandfather and just like an old person, boring, gross food. Everybody knows it. Nobody wants to be eating cottage cheese out of the tub. But, through observations on social media, like cottage cheese made a roaring comeback because of the virality and the DIY nature of this ingredient. People wanted to consume cottage cheese in a different form factor. We're making that more convenient for them. It's fun to see these recipes on TikTok and Instagram, but like who has the time and the energy and some of the tools to do so? So like by picking up on like this is what the customer wants, so let's do it for them and do it better than what they can do at home. That gives us such a competitive edge and advantage. For us right now, we're just like hyper focused on making the best possible froco and just paving the way for what this category could be. Of course, we right now we're just focusing on expanding and going deep in our backyard, being New York City, the tri-state area, and then opening up strategic geographic locations like Florida, and then eventually the West Coast in California. So we're a young brand, but we're very ambitious, and we also have such an enthusiastic customer base where um, there's demand for what we're doing. So it gives us more confidence and validation to open up new key strategic markets and ultimately just deal some more protein.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, I love that. I mean, I really do think that you guys are pioneering and like paving the way for creating a healthier, um, I want to use the word snacking, but like, indulgent food because I think it's high time, about time that we start looking towards there. And I mean, thank you so much for Joe and Drew, both of you guys, for like sharing your guys' journey. I think like it is very inspirational. And also, I think like something that I keep getting from, hearing what you guys are doing is that you have to be persistent, whether it's business, whether it's health, that there are going to be a lot of people who may not understand that. But like, if you truly believe in like what you're building, then people are going to start seeing. And I mean, that is, I think like that is very inspirational. So like again, both of you guys, thank you so much for sharing. We are tailing towards the end of the podcast, and I have probably and this is my last question, but I think it is probably the most important one. So I went to school in Syracuse and then lived in New York City, and there was always a debate. What is upstate New York? You guys source cottage cheese from Hudson Valley. So is that upstate New York?
I consider where Drew lived to be upstate New York in
Yeah,
Harlem.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe is from New York, so I think he's the one that can draw this line. But I reference the farm as being upstate. Put it that.
Yeah.
I grew up
I
in Warwick, New York, which is just on the border of New Jersey and New York. In New York, I don't consider that upstate. Yeah, upstate's like the Catskills, Adirondacks,
yeah,
the
I
Boomtowns.
agree. I remember like my first few months moving there, people would be like, "Oh yeah, we're going upstate," and it would be like Tarrytown. So I was just I felt like I need to, as soon as I saw Hudson Valley, I was like, I feel like I need to ask them this question. But thank you both of you guys for being on this podcast. This was like truly so fun to record and also like just like know your guys' background. I'm excited for what Smearcase is going to be in the next few years. I mean, you guys have already done such a great job, like, building your brand, but also, Drew, I loved, like, this is going to stick with me, rewiring the consumer's brain around like building healthier habits. So yeah, very excited for this. And thank you so much, you guys, again, for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us. It was
Thank
great
you.
talking with you, and go grab a pint of Froco.
Yes. And we will leave your guys' Smear Cases Instagram link in our bio. So if people want to check that out and stay updated. And yeah, let's have the food we love with the people we love.